Story. Welcome to the continuation of Cursed Harmony. Like I promised, I'm going to tell you all about Adobe's journey to getting and finding solution to her problem. So sit tight and relax because it's going to be an enjoyable ride. Okay? Who is excited? Yay! When Adobe and Ikenga arrived at the cave, they met an old man who happened to be the son of the herbalist they were seeking. He had succeeded his father after his death 2 years ago. Ikenga sat and narrated their plights to the old man, who listened carefully. Adobe also told her side of the story and begged the herbalist to help her break the curse. The herbalist told them that the curse can only be broken by the originals, meaning the three witnesses to the curse: his late father, the shrine, and Adobe's mother, the queen. He explained that since his father had passed away, the only option was to find the other witnesses and convince them to break the curse. Otherwise, Adobe would have to live with it for the rest of her life. He further elaborated that the curse had to be broken at the location where it was made. So they would need to visit the old location of the shrine to dig out a shell buried underneath. The herbalist informed them that the previous location of the shrine was demolished by missionaries and a school was built on that land, which is why his late father left and settled in the cave in the deepest part of Unquo Forest, away from confused villagers who were indecisive of what God to follow. Staring into thin air, looking lost and hopeless, as if she had been given a death sentence, tears rolled down Adobe's cheeks uncontrollably because her hope had been dashed. She had come here hoping to be cured of the curse that has ruined her life because of a crime she hadn't committed. As Ikenga watched tears roll down Adobe's eyes, he didn't offer consolation. He understood her need to express her long-contained emotions. He wondered what kind of mother would do this to her own child. His mind was in chaos, scanning through different scenarios that presented themselves before he broke the silence. And then he asked, what are the next steps to take? The herbalist instructed them to begin by finding Adobe's mother and convincing her to break the curse. While he was still speaking, Adobe interrupted with a scream of refusal. She said she had no intention of returning to the palace in her current state. Her plan had always been to break the curse and then return to see her father, the king, who she has missed for so long. After speaking her mind, Adobe stormed out of the cave in anger and frustration. Ikenga ran after her, but before he left, he promised the herbalist that they would follow his instructions and return for further guidance. Meeting Adobe outside the cave, he walked towards her and said, let's go home. Their journey back home was a quiet one. Neither of them said a word to each other. Both were lost in deep thoughts. Ikenga attempted to suggest a few things to Adobe, but each time he opened his mouth, nothing came out. So he gave up. Their journey lasted for 4 days, during which they survived on wild fruits they found in the forest. When they finally arrived at Nkwo, Ikenga decided to build a small shelter for Adobe so he could easily locate her whenever he visited. After that was done, he bid Adobe goodbye and promised to visit her the next day. Upon returning home, he noticed the way his neighbors looked at him and he deduced that something was wrong. They looked at him as if they had seen a ghost, and as he reached his house, he saw some women gathered around his mother, consoling her. The moment she saw him, she ran towards him and hugged him. She couldn't really say much because she was overwhelmed by joy. All she managed to say was, "I thought you were gone." Ikenga, confused by the whole drama happening right before his eyes, he maintained his composure till everything died down. When they got inside the house, he asked his mom what was going on, and she said she thought he was dead and eaten by wild animals since he never came back home about 1 week ago. His mom narrated how she sent out a search party to the forest to find him, but couldn't see a trace of him. That was when she concluded that a wild animal had devoured her son. She hugged him again and thanked the gods for giving her a second chance to be a good mother. There and then, she promised Ikenga that she would be a better mother to him and also improve on the way she spoke to him, because those days he was gone, she felt alone and dejected, nobody to call her own anymore, and so she promised to do better and love him more as he was her only child. Ikenga hugged his mom passionately because he couldn't remember the last time they both shared an intimate moment like this. His mother's behavior changed after she lost her husband when Ikenga was barely 4 years old. His late father was a palm wine tapper who lost his life one fateful day while tapping wine. According to the reports given to her, he lost his balance and fell to the ground and died on the spot. Nne, as they usually called Ikenga's mom, was devastated by the bad news. She became withdrawn and stopped smiling. But with time, she grew to be harsh and no longer showed the motherly love and affection she used to show Ikenga before his father's death. That night, they sat together and Ikenga narrated everything to her, from how he found Adaobi in the forest to their visits to the herbalist. Nne listened with rapt attention and couldn't help but sympathize with Adaobi. She advised Ikenga to assist Adaobi in any way he could, but to be careful not to neglect his own life in the process. Ikenga nodded in agreement, promising to help Adaobi break the curse. Adaobi spent the night in her newly constructed shelter alone, crying out her eyes. All these years, she had harbored so much pain in her heart and didn't realize how deep the pain has grown. Sleep was far-fetched from her eyes. She begged for it to come rescue her from her misery, but sleep ignored her plea. Soon morning came, and the first person that greeted her eyes was Ikenga. As he watched her gradually make her way out of the cage, he greeted her good morning. She replied reluctantly and then asked if he could find some sleep last night. Ikenga narrated the incident that happened at home on his arrival, and that made Adaobi chuckle for a bit. Ikenga smiled in fulfillment because he was able to make Adaobi smile. It's been 5 days since he last saw a smile on her face. "What are you going to do now?" Ikenga asked, and she replied, "I don't know." So Ikenga went ahead to suggest that they embark on a journey to her village. But the problem was that Adaobi couldn't remember the name of her village. She was only 8 years old when her mom cursed her and sent her out of the palace. "Gosh! Another dead end again," Ikenga exclaimed. So the only thing they could resolve to do was to visit all the neighboring villages, hoping that they would find a clue and eventually locate the village whose princess went missing 20 years ago. At the first night the next day, Ikenga bid his mom farewell and journeyed together with Adaobi to the nearest village they could find. The first village was Obodo village. They inquired if they had a missing princess in their history. Everyone they asked said no. And finally, on visiting the king of Obodo village, he told them that he heard of one story about a missing princess a long time ago, but can't remember the name of the village. But he told them that a friend of his who told him about the story would be visiting in 4 days. Adaobi and Ikenga decided to stay back at Obodo in the king's palace for the remaining 4 days. During their stay at Obodo, the only daughter of the king grew in affection towards Ikenga because he was a fine, able-bodied young man, and so he was treated and hosted well at the palace. Every day, Princess Ihoma would visit Ikenga in his chambers to strike conversations with him. She enjoyed his company so much that she couldn't hide how she felt towards him. Ihoma was a beautiful maiden, and most eligible men of Obodo tried to ask for her hand in marriage. But she turned all of them down because she didn't find any one of them suitable enough. The rejection continued until Ikenga showed up. Even though he didn't indicate interest in Ihoma, it didn't matter because everyone could see the way she looks at him. Even her father, the king, took notice of it and one day called her to confirm his suspicion. "Ihoma, my daughter, I see the way you have grown fond of this young man who is a guest in our palace. What is going on between the both of you?" the king asked. Ihoma responded, "Father, when I'm around him, my heart skips a beat, and I think about him a lot, even in my sleep. I think I'm in love with him, Father." The king acknowledged it because He had never seen his daughter like this with any man before, and sometimes it worried him that she might grow old and remain unmarried in his palace. Seeing that the gods might have heard his silent prayers and brought Ikenga for his daughter, he made up his mind that he was going to marry her off to Ikenga. He sent for Ikenga at once after he had dismissed Ihoma. He praised Ikenga for being a noble young man and inquired more about his background and why he was traveling with the slowest animal in the world on an important journey as this. Ikenga answered the king saying that the tortoise was his pet and special companion. Unknown to the king, the tortoise he inquired about had the ability to hear and speak. Ikenga's reply to the king made Adaobi happy because she could see that she meant a lot to Ikenga despite Princess Ihoma's boast to her fellow maidens about how Ikenga was head over heels about her. She realized that each time Ihoma boasted, she felt the urge to reply her. She felt her heart beat faster the day Ihoma expressed her feelings towards Ikenga. She wondered why her tiny heart was racing so fast. She was interrupted by Ikenga's voice, who was looking for her everywhere. Lifting her off the ground, he gave her a kiss on her head. King Izuna waited patiently for his friend's visit, and when the fourth day finally approached, he welcomed Prince Obike, offered him drink, and both of them exchanged pleasantries, laughed, and gisted for a while before King Izuna chipped in the conversation about the missing princess story he told him some time ago. Prince Obike, son of the king of Avo, who happened to be the stepbrother of Adaobi, exhaled a sad sigh and recounted the story about how the princess got missing from the palace. Izuna, shaking his head in sadness, asked Obike what village the incident happened. That was when Prince Obike opened up and told him it was his elder sister who went missing 20 years ago. He went on to narrate how his father haven't stopped looking for her even after so many years. The hope of finding her one day keeps his father the king going and alive. Wow, such a wicked world, King Izuna exclaimed. Obike spent the night at Obodo, which happens to be his normal routine whenever he visited, because he had eyes for Ihoma, the only daughter of King Izuna. Although King Uzuna and Obike were childhood friends, Izuna lost his father, the king of Obodo, at a very tender age, so he was coronated king of Obodo when he was barely 16 years old. He married and gave birth to his 3 children in time. Obike, on the other hand, remains the crown prince of Afu, since his father, the king, was still very much alive. Ihoma never saw Prince Obike in a romantic light. She saw him as her elder brother and didn't really take his advances seriously. Before Prince Obike retired to bed, he requested to see Ihoma, and when she came, he presented the gift he bought for her, and she loved it and was giggling ear to ear. The next day, he was set to return to Avon. While his carriage was being prepared, he caught sight of a beautiful tortoise moving in the opposite direction and called out to his friend, Izuna, could you gift me this beautiful tortoise? But Izuna laughed and told him he would find another one for him. They bid themselves goodbye, and King Izuna returned to his palace. Ikenga, seeing the visitor leave the palace, assumed it was the friend the king mentioned to him earlier, so he quickly went to see the king. When the bodyguard informed the king of Ikenga's presence, the king beckoned on him to enter. Then he greeted him properly before asking if the visitor he spoke of had arrived since it was the 5th day. The king nodded in affirmation and also told him that he was able to get the information he sought after. Ikenga smiled in anticipation, praising the gods of his land in his heart for finally granting him his desires. The king smiled back and studied Ikenga's countenance for a while before he spoke again. Ikenga, the king said, I want to give you my only daughter out in marriage to you. I have seen how both of you look at each other, and it's only right I give my permission for the wedding to begin. You know how these things can be, right? Ikenga, shocked at what the king had just said, wondered where all of these things came from. The king continued, I have slated your wedding to be on Eke market day. At this point, it dawned on Ikenga the king was serious, and so he responded, Your Highness, I thank you for considering me as a suitable suitor for your beautiful daughter. But I never indicated interest to marry your daughter. I see that the princess is all over me and has even expressed her feelings towards me. But I never for one day told her that I loved her and wanted to marry her. King Izuna looked at Ikenga with an angry face and told him he has to marry the princess, else the information he was looking for will be withheld from him. And so, in that anger, he dismissed Ikenga and asked him to think about his proposal carefully and give him an answer in the next 2 days. Ikenga left the presence of the king feeling downcasted. Adaobi, sighting him from the corner of the palace, started crawling towards him. She wanted to speak to him so bad, but she couldn't because she didn't want their secrets to be exposed. So she could only nod and hope that Ikenga understood her body language. Seeing that Ikenga was looking sad, she decided to demonstrate using her body and her head to speak to Ikenga, but all of her demonstrations proved abortive because he kept on moping into the thin air and was walking like he was being controlled by a remote control. He walked for a while, farther and farther away from the palace gates. Adaobi, looking back at how far they were from the palace, she couldn't hold it anymore, and so she screamed his name impatiently. Ikenga, what is wrong with you? Her scream brought Ikenga back to his senses, and then he said, The king wants me to marry Princess Ihoma before he would release the information we are seeking. Adobe, shocked by the king's decision, stopped in her track and her heart started beating heavily over again as if she was being chased. She opened her mouth to speak, but words won't come out. Seeing the look in her eyes as tears gathered in them, Ikenga couldn't bear to see Adobe in pain. He knew that he wanted solution for her problem, but what he wasn't sure about was the length he could go to bring her the solution. He sometimes wondered to himself what she would look like if she were transformed back as a human. As for Princess Ihoma, he didn't feel anything towards her and was caught in between a better future for himself and finding a solution for Adobe because he felt a strong sense of responsibility towards her. While he was still collecting his thoughts together, Princess Ihoma came out from hiding in between the bush. Apparently, she saw Ikenga leave the palace and decided to follow him behind to see where he was headed. She has often wondered why Ikenga was so protective of the tortoise. Now she knows why. The moment Adobe saw her, her heart almost jumped out of her chest, saying that Princess Ihoma could have heard her speak. Guys, it's almost 10 p.m. No wonder I feel sleepy. I wouldn't want you to sleep late and wake up late tomorrow morning. Remember, early to bed, early to rise. I would continue our story unfailingly tomorrow and tell you all about Adobe's secret Ihoma just found out. Alright? For now, it's a good night from me to you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on your notification button to stay updated on the juiciest African tales. From me, see you in the next one. Bye.